Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Maria Donnelly. If you're here, chime in and let me know that you're here and where you're tuning in from. I'm going to check sound right quick. Here and where you're tuning in from. I'm going to check sound right quick. Okay. We are good to go. All right, everybody. Let's see, we have about 10 people here. Let me know who is here. Say hello. I'm curious what your favorite, if you've been following these this month, what your favorite demos have been. And, we have today and we have tomorrow are our final demos. You can grab a screenshot of this if you like. If you think you want to paint from this as well. So you can take some time before we start painting, grab a screenshot of the still life setup. This is going to be a looking down still life. So let me raise this up just a little bit more here. Oops. Okay. That's okay, Debbie. I was like, maybe this is a new term I haven't heard of. Secondary reflections. Yeah. Totally makes sense. No worries. Hello, Mary Brockman. Good morning. Hello, Hedda. Good morning. Hello, Barbara Schatz. Hello, Zara Oskin. I'm not sure if I say that correctly. I'm sure I don't. Hello, Marty. Yes, and hello, everybody. Hello, beautiful artists. Hello, Art Life School members. Welcome. These are our final 2 days together here on these Facebook Lives. I hope you have enjoyed them as much as I have. I hope they have, been of service to you, contribution to you in your art life journey. Good morning, Marion. Good morning, Manet from Georgia. Manet, am I going to see you at the Booth Art Museum workshop since you live in Georgia? That's going to be the first week of April. That would be lovely if so. Okay, good morning, Joan Langham. Good morning, Kathy Kepler and Betty Spy. Good morning. Good morning, Consuelo. Good morning, Liberty. Manny says yesterday's was her favorite, silver and roses. Yeah, if you have a favorite this month, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, I think probably everybody's had a chance to get a screenshot of the setup if you want to paint from this. So just a couple of reminders before we dive into this painting today. Good morning, Kelly Michaels. Oops, sorry. That was probably super loud. I got this new Tabouret, which I just love. It's like perfect height. Anyways, a couple of friendly reminders. Yes, today and tomorrow are the final Facebook morning lives, the February 20-day challenge that I've been doing for myself and with all of you. And so it's your last chance to watch these live. They will be recorded on the page through the 1st of March. So if you're not an Art Life School member, you can get caught up on anything, maybe do a binge watch on these before they disappear. And if you are an Art Life School member, don't worry because we've been putting all of these in your video library on the dashboard. Also, final reminder, this is the last week. The last winner will be announced tomorrow for the free DVD, which has 5 of my video lessons included. Really good mix and variety and combo of still life lessons on this. That's a value of $75. You simply have to be on my email list at artlifewithkelli.com. I've got the link there in the description box for you. And if you want to sign up for Art Life School, do so right there on that website. We'd love to welcome you in our awesome creative community of artists and get you going again with your artwork and get you back to the easel or just get you growing more and growing faster in your art if you are already keeping up with your art practice. So check those out. And if you're still not sure if you want to join the Art Life School, and you want more of a taste of how I teach and how I present, especially in the Art Life School, grab any of the freebies I have available for you on that website. There's a free masterclass, which is a $500 value for oil painting for beginners. That also goes through how to set up your still life stand and how to light your still life, all the things. That is super, super valuable. So if you're interested in oil painting or in still life in particular, grab that. It's absolutely my gift to you. And then also there is a 5-day still life painting challenge. This is a sequential step-by-step that is created over 5 days. Again, on still life painting and oil painting, so you can grab that as well. It's absolutely free of charge. Oh, I'm so sorry, Manny. I'll miss you at the workshop. Darn, I was hoping that would work out to see you there. I'm excited. It's going to be my first trip to Georgia other than a layover in Atlanta, so I'm excited to visit. Okay. All right, Barbara. And, you know, I'll say I'm going to miss these demos too, but Mama is also tired. And I'm looking forward to maybe having some more time in the mornings. But I'm glad that you've enjoyed them, and I'm glad that you're going to miss them. And Art Life School students, you can revisit them anytime in your video library. Okay. All right, let's get painting, y'all. Okay, I'm going to put it back on the setup and just kind of talk about the setup. We got more votes coming in. Marty says pink roses with the black base and high key background was her favorite. Awesome. Great, great, great. Yeah, and if you loved these live streams, then join us in the Art Life School community. Next week, we're actually going to do a 2-day live workshop on spring flowers, which I'm really looking forward to next Thursday and Friday. So let's talk about this setup here. I wasn't able to get sunflowers, and I'm not really sure, are these black-eyed Susans or are these just daisies? I'm not sure, but they kind of look a little similar to sunflowers with the darker center. And then of course that bright, bold yellow. Sometimes, you know, I think we overcomplicate, still lifes. We maybe put too much in. And on that note, you know, if you want to learn more about setting up your own still life, join me tomorrow for Lunch and Learn on Oil Painters of America. Check my stories on any of my social media posts if you're looking for the link for that. That's through them, not through me. But I'll go into detail to set you up better for success with still life setups. But sometimes we just kind of throw too much in and then it ends up just looking like a big cluttered mess or like a garage sale gone wrong. And so we want to keep it simple. This is going to be a looking down still life, and it is going to be all about depth of space. You know, so there's going to be more empty space in the foreground. Since I'm doing a horizontal, that will limit how much empty space I have. I'm going to do this on a little 6x8. And these two objects are very, very simple. They tie together because of the center of the little flowers. It is the same color as the, you know, little Asian jar here, which I just love this jar. It's so beautiful. But, you know, it's a little simple, right? So if you want a bit more complexity, you can add something in like that patterned drape or something like that maybe has some added colors. If for your taste, your style, if you're feeling like, this is going to be a little bland, I invite you to consider, however, to embrace the bland sometimes with still life, because this all is going to come to life so much more in paint, in color, in brush strokes. This is actually going to be so much more exciting in paint than it is, you know, in the actual still life setup. So you want to keep that in mind. Sometimes whenever you're setting up a still life, it feels like, like, man, is this really going to be worthwhile painting? But it really, really is. It will be so much more exciting in paint. So I invite you to consider just embracing maybe this feels a little bit dull, so that you can find ways to make the painting exciting in paint. with color, with brushstrokes, with contrast. You know, I do feel like that also increases your understanding about how to make a painting compelling with very few objects, very few things. So I'm actually going to be painting this without the drapery today, just so you know. But I wanted to throw out like another option if it's just, you set something up like this and you just go, oh my God, I don't think this is going to be that interesting. Another option you can do without adding in like another object would be to add in something like a background drape. So since there's no pattern on either one of these objects, the base is very simple. You can use a patterned drapery to bring in maybe some extra pattern and detail and color. I just want to point out that when you use drapery, say on the background or in the foreground, use your drapery on purpose. Okay, so you don't want to have just a random drapery that's, you know, just leading the eye all over the place with a bunch of folds going everywhere. Use your folds intentionally, okay? So you want to design the folds maybe to point to a point of interest in your painting. If it's like a cloth that's on the tabletop plane, you know, angle the edges of the cloth or the folds, lead the eye in a direction, much like a path would lead the eye, you know, in a landscape or a little river or a little path, right? So if you're putting it on the tabletop plane, you know, you could go kind of counter, maybe you have a cloth kind of going this way, or maybe a cloth that kind of curves around, something like that, you know. So if you're using drapery like this, just make sure that you are using it with compositional intent. And then these kind of draperies that I do back here, it's not really drapery, it's just a cloth, which is to get me close to the color and value that I want in the background. I would never copy, you know, if there are any folds or any creases, you know, I would probably never copy those unless they're intentional. And don't forget about your cast shadow is a part of your drapery. So you also not only want to follow where the angle of the drapery is leading to, but make sure you're also looking at the cast shadow, like where does that line end, where's this line point us to on the object, okay? So I'm going to paint this without the drapery because I want to show how little we can have in a still life and still make it interesting and compelling. Okay, so without further ado, let's get going. And if you took your screenshot of the still life setup, you can paint along with me. Sound good? Sound like fun? Sound like playing, staying? And these little daisies also have some size variety, which is nice. The other thing I wanted to show with this one is that we don't always have to put flowers in a vase. Okay, so there's more ways to play with flowers. You can lay them down on the tabletop plane. You can have some in a vase and some on the tabletop plane. So there's more ways to paint flowers. You can also do a vignette of flowers where you just zoom in on the bouquet or the flower and you don't actually paint the vase that they're in, so on and so forth. More than one way to set up flowers. Oh gosh, the angle of this, I'm not going to be able to paint that angle, so let me readjust this and readjust the camera. Okay, is that going to work? I think so. Oh, I wish you could attend too, Lynn. All right, let me see. Let me just get this angled a little bit more towards the camera. That ought to work. Reloading the palette. Need some more white today, some more burnt umber. Hope you guys can see too just how much paint I go through, even on small paintings. And even with knowing what I'm doing most of the time. So if you are not going through as much paint as I am, it probably means you're not using enough paint in your paintings. Food for thought. Black. Oh, you cannot see the rest of my palette. All right, reloading burnt sienna. There's going to be a lot of earth tones in this painting. Lots of warmth, lots of earth tones. Ivory black, I'll probably use that to make my greens over any of these blues. That will be blue enough. Let's see, anything else? Maybe more yellow ochre because I have that really warm background. Can't seem to get my camera the way I want it today. Still feel like it should be a little bit lower. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get started with some liquid light gel. I'm going to start today with this different brush. This is the synthetic brush that Silver Brush makes called Bristlon. So number 6 filbert. These are actually really, really nice. They still have, so if you just don't like those hog hair brushes, and for acrylic or water-based artist, the hog hair, it's like our natural hair. So it really does soak up a lot of the liquid versus these, are more kind of like a plastic kind of bristle, so they don't soak up quite as much of the water, or the medium. If you're using water, for acrylic or for water mixable oils. And this may just be a better option for some of you. So I like to, based on what you like and how you like the paint to go down, how you like the brush strokes to go down. I'm just going to start this with some burnt umber. You always want to make sure that you get rid of the white if possible. Even if you're doing a high key, you would tone lighter on a high key, as you've seen me do this month in some of the demos. But you want to get rid of stark white. Stark white is so hard to judge values against. And this is really the stage that I use most of my medium. So you want to be careful how much medium you use as well. I'll never forget one of the first workshops I ever taught in Oklahoma after moving back there from Connecticut from art school. One of the students in the workshop, I came around and her painting was just dripping with this liquid, with her liquid, and I was like, oh no. Oh boy. So unfortunately she had to wipe down the whole thing and break out a new canvas. And those are just things that if you don't know, you don't know, and I definitely remember my first time working with oils at art school. I had only painted in acrylic before that. And I just didn't know. I didn't know how much medium to use. I didn't know what the medium was for. And nobody really told us. They just said, buy this to make your medium. And the ones that they had us buy was, they had us make our own typical painter's medium with mineral spirits and oil and a little bit of varnish. But it was so runny and watery. And so I would say if you are a total beginner, I would recommend that you don't paint with any medium if you can get away with that, so that you learn to use the oil paint, or paint with those basically less, err on the side of less medium rather than more. even if you feel like it's taking you a while to get the ground covered, and if you are going to use it mostly in the tone. And then that way your surface and your brush is not too wet and you can put wet paint on top of it. So I remember one day doing a painting and just using way too much medium, and like all of my paint was just, dripping off of the canvas. Even a really dry canvas, my paint was just dripping off of the canvas like watercolor. And I hated that painting. We were taught really to draw, put kind of this precise drawing on the canvas and then start painting. And so at the end, it looked like, kind of a filled in, like a filled in coloring book or something, because the paint was so thin. I'm just using some burnt umber here, a little bit of medium, but little bit. The wetter this gets, the harder it's going to be to have thicker paint sit on top and stick on top. So just keep that in mind. Even on a dark object like this, when you start your mass in, which I prefer to do over drawing, contour drawing for painting, because it gets me in the painting mindset right away and not the drawing mindset, which are two different things, two different kind of art making approaches. Yes, you need a drawing skill set in order to paint to some degree, but when you start painting, it's like you want to be thinking about painting more than drawing. So anyways, but you just want to consider how much medium you're using, and how even sometimes how thick, of paint in that initial layer that you're putting down, to make sure that thicker strokes are going to sit on top. So I love this little, anybody help me out with what kind of flowers these are? Are these just daisies, or are they black-eyed Susans? I'm curious if y'all know. So on a looking down still life, like I said, typically you want more space in the front. You want smaller objects in front, moving to larger objects in the back. So if you're struggling with looking down still lifes where you're showing more of the tabletop, go small in front, large in back. So you go small, medium, large. You kind of mass in where this group of yellow flowers, let's call them yellow flowers. These flowers are so cute though. They really have such a joyful feeling to them. I'm just going to kind of paint through where these stems are. And then everything at this stage, you want to connect up all your cast shadows if they're connecting, ground everything down. That's actually how I find, placement on the picture plane is looking at the cast shadows, especially on a looking down still life. So, Betty, you might grab that oil painting for beginners masterclass, which goes through how to set up a still life, and that can help you solve some of those issues that you have as well. I prefer to be able to see my still life and my painting without having to, turn my head too far. I like to be able to just look and look and look and look and look. So I like to have my easel angled to where it's almost kind of side by side, and to where my arm is not in the line of sight. So since I'm right-handed, and if you were left-handed, it would be, probably the opposite direction. But since I'm right-handed, I like it to be, the stand to be angled and open on the left-hand side, facing the still life, if that makes sense, like you see it here on the camera, so that I'm not casting a shadow on my painting with my paintbrush, because, most of my strokes tend to go this direction. So you can see that cast shadow from my paintbrush is not in my line of sight either. That can be very, very frustrating. These are, very real, practical problems that we run into as artists. Just learning how to get yourself set up is a very important problem to solve. Let's see, these are really just kind of a triangle type of mass. I'm using my cast shadow in the background. I'm not going to put in those centers just yet. And just kind of getting in that background cast shadow color and tabletop cast shadow color, or a value, which is just burnt umber right now. It's not really a color yet. And, if I wanted to, I could, create a little more cast shadow in front, but I think the angle that I've created with the shadow box is pretty darn good. You do want to watch out for doing angles like this, too steep of angles on a tabletop. It's going to make everything feel like or if you're painting an actual tabletop, maybe you set up something on a kitchen table, that has, vertical planks, be careful with too steep of an angle like that. It's going to make everything feel like it's sliding off the canvas. So you do want to, make sure that things are, horizontal enough, not too diagonal. Any of your brush strokes on this tabletop plane, just make sure that it's not too diagonal, I would say. Okay. Now for background color, it's mostly going to be yellow ochre. It's got a little bit of burnt sienna in it. It's kind of got a little golden tone to it. It ties in with the yellow color of the both colors in the still life. So you could say that this is almost kind of an analogous color scheme where everything feels like it belongs to one or, a close color family. So all the colors, meaning all the colors have a color in common, would be an analogous color scheme. So that could be anything from, like an analogous color scheme could be anything that includes a yellow, for example. So it could be yellow to yellow orange to, yellow green even perhaps. Or it could be quite limited in its range, like this, where it's, a bright yellow, a muted yellow orange, like the background, and maybe, just non-color or neutral colors added in. So it's kind of a fun idea to play around with. I recommend if you are exploring that, it's your first time exploring that. Something I used to do in the early days is I would just put out just the colors I wanted to create an analogous color scheme with, and I would mix those up and just paint with those colors. So you can also just pick one color and then come up with all different kinds of variations on that color. And that just brings a lot of natural harmony into your painting. And it's just one kind of look, one kind of option. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit lighter on this back right-hand side. And I know that this side of my Asian jar can go darker as well, but I know I want more contrast right in here around that shadow edge against the lighter background. I'll just kind of blend that in and make it look like I didn't do that. The foreground also is going to have a lot of kind of burnt sienna. The other thing that brings harmony to this picture is so much of the colors are, these rich, warm earth tones. I'm going to put this on kind of thinner. And then the color that's different, that's going to stand out more, is the vibrant, more of the cadmium yellow, that more kind of sunshiny cadmium yellow. It's not an earth tone. Thank you guys for chiming in. Yeah, so I just use a paper towel, to pull paint off my brush rather than rinse it out in mineral spirits so that my brush doesn't get too wet, so that I can paint more wet into wet without having to wait for my brush to dry. And then I'm going to go in for the ultimate kind of climax, what often is saved for the end of the still life in a lot of how-to books. They build everything up and then they save the highlight for the last step. And I find that just doesn't really help me know what all else is required in between the start step and the last step. So it helps me to be able to see, like, here's the final, this should be kind of the final finishing look of the light, and also some finishing detail on the object so that I know how much more is required or how little is required, and what is required in those in between, in between the start, just the mass of the object, and the finish. So what is required in between the start and the finish? If I don't have both the start and the finish established, especially the finish, it's very hard for me to know what else is required, to make that object look more finished and resolved. Okay, so then I know, oh, okay, yeah, I know what all else needs to be put in. And more accurately, I would say, in a lot of cases, how little needs to be put in so that the painting stays strong and simple in its shapes and in its values, and therefore has more visual pull, and grab, kind of a visual grab, like visual Velcro to the viewer. So the more, and also less overworked by the end. Okay, so I'm using black and alizarin to, push those darks darker. I know that burnt umber is nowhere near as dark and rich as this can go. Things like, the little glazed drip down here, that could be a little finishing detail that's fun to put in. That is very characteristic to this kind of jar. And then I'm going to keep this a little bit lighter up here. And then that background, some more of these kind of drips and pattern of color in the jar are very similar to the background color. So I already have my background color on, and I can start to put in some of these specific details to this object. And my constraint here is to make sure that these more specific elements describe the three-dimensionality of the form. So if I put in pattern on this side, it's going to curve with this side of the form. If I put in pattern on this side, it's going to curve with this side of the contour. Okay, so that I get the illusion of this, roundness in the form. There's a little bit kind of a cool gray, blackish, more of a color, coolness around the highlight. When you're painting a really warm object like this is one way that you can make a simple object like this more exciting, is by playing with cool on top of warm, right? So I can just do like some ivory black and a little bit of Naples yellow. It's not the same value as the highlight or same color, but it's kind of a haze around the highlight. Okay. And then the challenge with these dark objects is doing this in such a way that it doesn't make the object look too lit up, too light in value. So sometimes, I might put in a little too much, or maybe I put in so much of this red orange that I lost the effect of the pattern. Well, I could just come back in with some burnt umber, for example, or more of the darks, and kind of try to bring back in some of that. It almost looks like a little leopard patches or something. So painting wet into wet, also here, like if it gets if I got it a little too cool or a little too bright, I can just layer wet into wet a darker color over the top. So a light over a dark creates a cool effect, and a dark over a light will warm that up. But most importantly, I know I need to bring, more focal point towards the center of the form. Once I have, those contours established, that's the next, that's my next job, is to, bring focal attention on the center of the form. And then I'm just going to make this little top here a little bit bigger. And make the little spout a little bit more pronounced here. Okay, so something else that might be really important to put in would be the yellow reflected light. So I'll grab some Cab Yellow Deep and just wet into wet, kind of mix that in, wet into wet, so both colors mix together, the underneath color of the jug and then the yellow. I want to put that a little bit more closer to center. So again, I pull the focus towards, pull the viewer's focus more towards the center of the form to get more illusion of three-dimensionality in the object. Okay. Is this making sense at all? And then since my background is lighter than the jug, and the jug is real shiny, it's going to be causing a little bit of reflection into the back edge. So also how you can round out the form is by rounding out the shadow form with some reflected light. So the part of the shadow that's turned closest to the background without losing the dark edge against the background. Okay, so that's very, very subtle. If I have a really fine highlight on a small object, a small painting, I might just use my back end of my brush to establish that. Okay. And then again, knowing that I just started everything with burnt umber, I'm going to anchor down my cast shadows at this stage. And if any of my cast shadows, like here on the tabletop, need to go a bit darker and richer, which you'll know that based on the color and value of your tabletop, or, so if it's like a rich, warm brown, that means that your cast shadow is going to be, even darker, warmer brown than, so you need to have, in other words, you need to have enough value contrast between the shadow and the light. So look at the edge here where in your still life setup, where the light is meeting this shadow edge, cast shadow edge. Make sure you have enough of contrast there. Now, some of that stone on the bottom, I love getting that in. So I'm going to do some yellow ochre and white, and then grab some burnt umber, because it's not a really bright yellow. So I need to kind of neutralize it. You use white to neutralize and lighten as well. So adding in more white down here. And then I'm going to start that edge kind of sharper towards the base of the object. So I tend to kind of twist. I talked about this the other day, or maybe it was yesterday. I can't remember. They're all kind of running together now. But where I want a sharp edge, I tend to twist the paint off the brush and create that soft edge, and then wipe my brush where it's dry. And then if this edge is softer, just kind of take the edge of the brush over. Okay, to soften, you want sharp on the edge, sharp on the outside, soft on the inside. So the start or end of forms are sharper edges as a general rule of thumb. For that color in shadow, it's a different color than the brown of the jug, and I think it's an important detail. I'm using black and yellow ochre, and same kind of technique. Or you can make 2 strokes and then wipe your brush and come back in and just kind of run your brush over that edge that you want to be softer. Okay, so soft edges keep the eye moving, keep flow happening, and then sharp edges stop the eye. Highlights are probably like your sharpest edge, especially on, shiny, light reflective objects. And typically on those, so you want the whole shape of the highlight to be overall sharper than anything and thicker than anything underneath. But the other thing to keep in mind on highlights is usually they're sharper on the bottom of the highlight where the plane is changing most dramatically, especially on a curved object. And then they tend to be a little bit softer on the top and kind of more integrated on the top. And if you give the highlight, kind of a tail, so to speak, you want to make sure that tail is curving towards the next secondary highlight. And if you get your highlights too big or too thick, you can always carve them down. Sometimes too, just using a soft hair brush, kind of patting over it instead of dragging will just kind of soften that look if you want it to look a bit more hazy and more kind of fused together. And some of these brush techniques are just specific to me, and what makes sense with my nervous system and what I've just kind of learned how to use the brush. A lot of this, nobody really showed me how to use the brush. So you might find a different way to use your brush to create the same kind of effect. It doesn't matter how you get there. What matters is, getting there. And that it works for you and that it makes sense to you. But I do know from teaching that sometimes, my way of doing it works for some people. So I like to explain it. But more importantly is knowing why you would be doing that. You need to know the whys behind things, not just copying what somebody else is doing or just trying to slavishly emulate them in hopes that, you'll get the same look. You need to understand the whys behind things. All right, make sure you don't lose, the start of the shadow. And on a dark object, yes, there is a start of the shadow. It's such a dark reflective object that sometimes it's hard to see it. But this is still a solid form, and so the start of that form shadow is on that second, that right-hand side third of the object. Okay, so you do want to make sure that this is curving with this side of the contour and that you don't lose the beginning, what they call the core shadow. All right, for greens, I'm going to start with black, ivory black, and cad yellow deep. I feel like if I put too much blue in this, it's going to totally be too cool and clash with, look how green that looks in this context, in this like red, orange, burnt sienna world. This looks super green already just with black. So you don't always need, a vibrant blue to make a green. Anything that has just a little bit of blue, like even this kind of soft gray, and then we've got reflection of the green into that jug. Anything that has some amount of green in it will look more green. And then definitely got to go pretty much to black down here, because in these cast shadows, it goes really, really dark. I would recommend that you don't start staring into your cast shadows too much, because you'll start going, oh, I see all this value contrast. And then you'll build all this value contrast in your shadows, and you will lose the depth of your shadows, especially cast shadows. You want to keep those really simple. All right, so moving on to the little flowers here, I'm going to start by reestablishing the angle. The angle of this flower is angling in, and it's right around in this department here, this area. So I'm just going to use a little piece of my paper towel to just remove some of that paint. But you do want to paint things that are behind first before you try to paint this, or else you'll be painstakingly, very painfully trying to paint around all these little teeny tiny petals. And so I like to paint whatever's behind first as a general rule of thumb. And then paint the thing that's in front. I'm going to paint the yellow petals first and then paint the center, the dark center into that. Starting with some Cad Lemon and Cad Yellow Deep. And this one is kind of angling more towards me, kind of more like portrait, head on. So I'm going to start building these petals around, radiating around where the center is going to be. And I would recommend making them kind of cover up some of the center as well, because you're going to put that center on top. Okay, and then I have to think about which, even it's not directly facing me head on, so it's slightly angled away from the light source, so and to the right. So what that means is that these petals on this side are going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to grab my smaller brush here. This is a size 0. I'm switching to a hog hair bristle brush so that all of this brushwork really sits on top of the paint underneath and has more of this powerful kind of impasto effect. But the petals on this side, on the right-hand side, are going to be a bit longer than the rest of the petals. You have to get the perspective of the petals so that they don't all feel like all the flowers feel like they're at the same, facing you head first, so to speak. The top flowers will be longer than the bottom flowers that are sitting on the ground plane. That's another perspective change. Foreshortening, is what they call that. Okay, I'm going to break the edge, paint through the edge horizontally for reflection, reflected light. I'm going to make that more dramatic than what it looks like in the still life, so that with a really simple still life, things like that start to play a big role. Reflected lights, textures, brushwork. Okay, and then I'm going to put on the center. This one I'm not going to make quite as dark as the rest. I don't want it to look like a black hole, like a black eyeball just staring at me. So I'm going to start with burnt sienna, and I'm going to grab a little bit of my green here. Actually, let's do some burnt umber. Make sure any shape that you need to be you need to put it on and it needs to be a specific shape. Then you have to use thick enough paint on the brush. So painting the little center of this is very different than painting the tabletop plane or the background, right? This has to be specific in shape. So that means I have to have enough paint on the end of my brush to make that happen. Does that make sense? It can't be like thin paint on my brush. There's a little bit of green in there, which is such a tiny painting. I don't know if I can make that work or not. Okay, going back to my number 2. Going back in with the yellows. This is going to be the most vibrant one. And now I can see, now that I have this in, I can see that this can be stronger. So sometimes without this, you can't really accurately judge that all the way. You can put it in, but, in the beginning, but you can't really accurately judge what that color should be, the right value, the right intensity of that reflected light without the light that's causing the reflected light. And I just try to push those lights to the maximum as well for maximum contrast. Okay, I'm breaking my own rule here, I guess, so to speak, by not adjusting this value in the background. So let me do that right quick, painting what's behind. Again, that was just the burnt umber. And so that won't really work, to finish out the painting. So I feel like this is just too green. Need some black in it. I don't have enough value contrast against that background. These dark green leaves. Again, sometimes our brain goes, that's green, make it green. So when in doubt, go for value over saturation or color. You have to have the value contrast in a situation like this more than, the local color of the object. The viewer's eye will connect that that's green. Or your eye will. And then more darks for the stems, just black. Okay, so we want a color that relates to this. I've got my local color here. If I want to make any adjustments to the background color, I could do that, now, like if I want to go a little bit lighter back there, which I probably do just a bit. A little more Naples yellow and yellow ochre. Like I think this could get even more contrast here around these darker edges. But the whole background doesn't have to be that light, But I do think this can be have a little more contrast and attention. And while I'm there, just kind of sharpening up some of those edges there. Just want to blend that in so it becomes more of an invisible effect, not so obvious that I did it. And also it could be to get more contrast around this green leaf that I'm going to create more of a value contrast there. And if I need to reshape anything, like kind of give this a little more curve, it literally kind of feels like I'm carving off a part of that form to give it a little more shape. All right. When I'm mixing this color, I'm going to be looking at this color over here to make sure I get in the right ballpark with that. So I will start off with some burnt umber, but I feel like it needs to have a little more, kind of glow in it, a little more coverage. So I'm going to add in some cab yellow deep. Let's see if that dog will hunt. No. Okay. A little more black, a little more burnt sienna. Needs to be darker enough. Let's see about that. If you're going to use a cast shadow angle, the cadmium is really going to give this a little more solidity. Cadmium and just thicker paint as well. If you're going to use this cast shadow, have it be sharp enough that it, is creating an angle to the still life setup where you want the eye to first kind of go, much like using the drapery angle. If you're using a cast shadow angle, it's the same kind of approach. But just make sure it's not too sharp of an edge. Okay, where it just you want it to be there, but not look like it's, pasted on. You want it to look like it's just shadow. It's the same wall, just shadow on the same wall. Okay, and then building in some of that, going a little bit darker towards the base over here and on the left around these little daisies, little yellow flowers. So I like to do vertical strokes in the background for the most part, the back wall, and then more horizontal strokes on the tabletop plane. And I've got an angle here for this cast shadow. I just want to make sure it doesn't get too steep of an angle. And then a little bit of, debris in the foreground goes a long way. It's not really just smaller objects. Like smaller objects, I'm going to relocate this. It's going to move a little bit to the right. And again, sometimes I don't really know exactly where to place that quite yet in the painting until, I get going, but it's such a small thing that it's not, it's not really the meat and potatoes of the painting. So I don't have to worry too much about, did I get that exactly in the right spot right away? And if you're painting sitting down and up close, just make sure, even on a small painting, that you're taking some time to kind of step away from the painting, because sometimes some details look like they're holding and some contrasts look like they're holding from sitting up close. But then whenever you back up, it's like, that just totally disappears from a distance. Even if it's just from like 5 feet away, smaller paintings, you typically do have, they typically don't read from as far away. That's why, like in the old days, way back in the day, if they were doing murals, or big paintings in churches, or think about the Sistine ceiling, those had to be large enough and it had to read from, sometimes hundreds of feet away. So these smaller, intimate still lifes, they don't have to read from 20, 30 feet away, but I would say you do want them to at least read from a couple feet away so that it pulls the viewer in. So it makes sense from enough distance, but it also pulls the viewer in. So I am probably less than a foot away from this painting right now. So I would want to just make sure that, if I have a frame on this and it's hanging on the wall or in a tabletop easel, that it still does make sense across the room, or at least a few feet away. So bigger paintings, have to have even bigger shapes, even clearer shapes than smaller paintings. We went to the Sistine ceiling at the Vatican to see the Sistine again in the fall whenever we were in Europe, and it's crazy how small the figures feel from down below, because that ceiling is so high. But most of us just see those images in print and they're zooming in with the camera. So if you can ever get a photo of them that doesn't feel as zoomed in, I highly recommend checking it out, because they are, smaller than what you kind of expect them to look like in real life. I'm following the same process down here that I did on this, flower down here, switching to my number. Those strokes got a little, maybe too textured. And this flower also is kind of this one's turning facing the light source. If it helps, something that can definitely help is putting in the centers first. If you're afraid that really helps with the perspective. So this ellipse here, these little button centers, they're really little ellipses. And you want to think about, what direction is that little ellipse facing? I can go darker on these because they're more on the shadow side. And then like this one's kind of turned more towards me, so the ellipse is going to be facing more towards me. So that means like this one, the ellipse is going to be curved this way. And then the fullness of the little button is going to be on that side. This one's facing the same angle as that one. This one's really facing away and mostly in shadow. So the angle that you put in the little button center makes a difference. One thing I forgot to do is maybe just do like some scattered petals. So maybe I'll invent that a little bit. And then for the shadow, much like making a shadow yellow on a lemon, I might start that color with burnt umber, not black, because it's going to go too green if I use black. So burnt umber and some cad yellow deep for some of these kind of darker darker yellow. And if that still looks a little too green, add a bit of burnt sienna. I'll grab a little burnt sienna. And with the petals, I'm thinking the same, same thing. Which side of the petals am I seeing more of? And which side of the flower am I seeing more length on the petals to describe that more accurately? Which side is more foreshortened? So the more angled, foreshortened side are shorter petals. The side of the flower that is more open towards me, that's going to have longer length. So here, this one's facing towards me. I'm going to move that backward because you're going to grow a little bit bigger than what they are, which is okay because I think these are such small little flowers. Okay, if we invent a little bit and make them a little bit bigger. So take some time also sometimes just to observe, just to really look at flowers, just pick one flower, put it at different angles, really just take time just to look at it and study what you're seeing. Sometimes we just don't take enough time to study and look and really think about it and take it in, We think we know what things look like. But most of us, most humans, we don't really have that much time to observe everything. So most humans will get kind of the general idea of things because they don't need to know all those details that I was just talking about. Most people don't need to know all that. They just need, the basics like, oh, this is just a yellow flower, But as an artist, that's part of our job is really understanding the thing that we're painting and really observing it sensitively and pulling out those little bits of information and detail that the average, lay person who's not an artist would not perceive, would not even have the attention or the bandwidth to take it in. Right. So in a way, painting actually used to be considered a science, and art actually used to be part of like the Olympics. Did you guys know that? Like the arts used to be part of the Olympics years and years ago. So, I don't know where the blame, not that it helps anybody blame anybody, but where the change happened in all of that. But art used to be, considered more of a science and more of a, really an esteemed thing to be able to do. Writing, literature, art making. So I'm making some lighter greens here where they're against the vase and in front of the cast shadow, like there's a nice green leaf here. And then some little tidbits of green sticking up against the back shadow. I feel like this shape could be a little bit clearer. So I'm going to beef up, make the edge a little bit sharper there, make it a little bit lighter. Maybe make this whole thing just a little bit larger without it going too big. So even if you don't have time to paint, take time to look closely at things and study them. Like pretend that you are a fascinated archaeologist or a botanist if you're looking at flowers, and you're really looking to really see the thing for real. All the little nuances and details. So I'm just going to grow this one a little bit more. This one's mostly in shadow, so it's okay if it mixes in with that background color. The other thing with flowers on the tabletop that I do want to bring your attention to is, again, the weight of the petals, the weight of the flower is going to flatten flatten itself out on the weight of the, that gravity, the pressure weight of the flower is going to flatten out, just much like your butt sitting on a seat, right? When our butts are not sitting on the ground or on a seat, some of our butts are nice and round. It's very similar to these flowers. So the pressure, these are not a hard, solid object, hard, solid prop like this vase. This vase it has to be made flat in order to sit flat. But anything that's, kind of natural like these that are not made flat, they flatten out on themselves. So fabric will do that. Some just lighter weight objects in general will do that. So you want to make sure that you're going flatter on the bottom and rounder on top. And then for flowers that are not sitting on the bottom, they're going to be, round on top and round on bottom, because they're not sitting on anything. There's a little bit of cast shadow in here underneath this flower, because it is on top. Now that I'm talking about that, I'm really looking at that. It is on top of the other flower underneath, so it's going to cast a little bit of shadow on that one. Being a hunter of cast shadows, super important. Okay, so last but not least, it's going to be just kind of resolving and finishing up. And then I go back to the star of the show and see, is this interesting enough? And that's when I would stand up and get back from the painting. Do I have enough, unblended brushstrokes? That's kind of the first thing I look for on things like that. And I smoothed everything out, I blended everything in a bit too much. So I want to make sure, if I have broken color opportunities on the object or pattern opportunities on the object, I want to make sure that those stand out enough. And I just over blended them, And so I want to mostly put those in around the center of the form. So I'm coming back in with some more specific brushwork, specific what they call broken color in art, which is just unblended color. That's one of the main things you can begin to look at in your paintings. Is my color just too blended? My color's too blended, especially if you have a patterned object like this that has a little bit of pattern to it. It could be a pear also. Sometimes a pear or a piece of fruit has color changes, in the fruit. So you just want to make sure, is that showing up enough? Could that add more visual interest and detail there? Sometimes our highlights get a little too blended in and too soft. Mine definitely isn't, but I'll show you if your highlight does get a little too blended in. So let's say your highlight kind of looks like this, which is, can you see that when highlight is too soft and blended in like that, that the object does not look shiny anymore? Can everybody kind of see that effect? So let's say your highlight kind of got too soft and blended in. You're going to lose some impact because of that. So those are the things I would be looking for in the finishing. Are some things standing out enough? And then are the empty areas, kind of resolved enough? This, is just kind of doing a simple C shape in this composition. Can I play that up more? Maybe through reflected lights? Or is anything kind of taking away too much attention from my yellow? Is this color on the tabletop plane being so hot and so saturated? Is that kind of canceling out some of my bright yellow? Close, so maybe I can soften that, bring in maybe a little bit of black, a little bit of white into that mixture, maybe kind of float some cool kind of grayer color on top. I'm not doing complementary color in this painting, but I can play with very subtle cools and warms and saturation levels in this painting. So I can pull in, some more kind of a little bit touch cooler and grayer color here. I don't have to eliminate all of that hot sienna, but warm colors grab a lot of attention. And I would say yellow is probably the most aggressive color that gets our attention the most, a bright yellow like that, even over a red, but basically yellow, red, and orange tends to grab our attention the most. So if I have a lot of hot, warm color in the tabletop plane, it might just be a pinch too much, you know, so adding in a little coolness on top, like black and white, to kind of neutralize that. And then sometimes too, it's like, are my reflected lights bright enough, bold enough? Could they be bolder? I think this one definitely could. Talked about that earlier. Is that reflection telling the story of the form it's on in terms of the direction of it? And, you know, is it bold enough, but also making sure that it's not too overpowering as well. So it's a balance. It's like a little dance here. It can get too sharp, too strong. It's a little back and forth, playing a little bit back and forth with that balance. Making sure this little leaf feels sharp-edged enough. And I want to definitely make sure that the edge of that reflected light isn't touching the edge of these leaves. Let me see. Sometimes it's things that seem like, oh, it's so simple to do. And before you know it, it's like, I've been working on that for 20 minutes. All right. I forgot to put in some, usually I like to have like some, maybe a scattered petal or two whenever I'm doing flowers and have all this empty space. So maybe I'll invent, you know, one or two maybe overlapping in front of the cast shadow would be nice. Okay, I hope has this been helpful today? I did lose my power to my tablet, so I wasn't able to see comments about halfway through this. Just wanted to bring back that little center. And then again, if you want to kind of smooth out some of this background a little bit, or if you're getting any glare on the background, you can use either a palette knife very flatly. That can be really tricky if you're not practiced with the palette knife. So you can use also a soft-haired brush as well. Very challenging to paint this little teeny tiny flower, even with the size 0. Okay. All right, everybody. If you do these add any little petals, just be sure to give them a cast shadow underneath. Since I added in that petal, I'm just going to soften my reflection a bit here. Reflection should always be softer than objects in their edge. Okay, so I hope this has been educational for all of you. Hope it's been fun. Let's see if there's any questions I can answer before I go. You're so welcome, Manny. Unfortunately, Facebook has changed. I'm going to have to take this off, sorry, off the tripod so I can see your comments. Facebook has changed the way they do things here. Yay! Yay, Pam. She says, every day there was so much to learn. Today I almost kept up, but then I missed much of what you were saying. That's a downside with trying to paint along, isn't it? Yeah. Awesome. Hello, Vicky and Carol and Christy. Candy says, thank you so much, Kelly. You have taught me so much. Thank you for this group. Never stop learning. Yes, I love that. I love that. Always keeping that beginner's mind, always seeking to grow. That's what us as human beings are built for. We are built to keep evolving. That gives us more purpose and fulfillment in life. So if you're feeling a little stagnant, see how you can tap back into that beginner's mind, that open mind. How can you grow? What can you learn this week? How can you apply yourself this week? It's so important to our soul's growth and evolution, our spirit. Okay. That's why I think painting really is like a spiritual practice, and it is so, so meaningful. And not only you doing it, makes you grow and therefore a better person and better contributor, to all the rest of us. All right, Maria, glad you love painting along. Liberty says challenging. You're so welcome, Marty Robson. Okay, awesome. Good. Glad you guys had fun. Lynn says it's wonderful. Thank you so much. You're so welcome. You're so welcome, Maria. Okay, everybody. Aw, thank you, Betty. I really appreciate that comment. She says, you're the best teacher I've come across. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. I do try my damnedest, my darndest. I'm not always perfect, like any of us, and that is my heart's desire. So thank you so much for that comment. All right, everybody, I'll see you for the final one tomorrow. We're going to be doing a little paintini tomorrow, and there's the Lunch and Learn opportunity through Oil Painters of America. And that's going to be tomorrow at noon Central. You'll have to go to their website to get signed up for that. I have all of that. I've been posting about that in my posts and in my stories now all week, so you can easily find the link in one of those. Much love and happy painting. Bye for now.